through the walls. He thought the apartment was empty, until he heard the walls breathing, and from the cracks came his own scream. Anton hefted the last box through the cracked doorway, the smell of lemon polish and damp plaster hitting him like a challenge. Sunlight bled through moth-eaten curtains, glinting off the Art Deco tilework in the hallway, geometric patterns now fractured by hairline splits, their gold leaf peeling like scabs. His hallway, his first apartment. Proof. Mrs. Blackwood materialized from the shadows, her silhouette sharp against the warped mirror at the end of the corridor. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, which lingered too long on the walls. "No touching the plaster," she said, pressing a skeletal finger to the nearest surface. The paint here was pristine, a buttery ivory that clashed with the building's decay. Especially the seams. Anton laughed, brushing dust from his sleeve. "Seams?" She tilted her head, a spider's leg twitching near her temple. "The walls breathe, Mr. Kovacs. They remember." Her knuckles whitened as she traced a seam where two tiles met, a line so straight it felt wrong, like a scar pulled too tight. He followed her into the apartment. The living room boasted a grand bay window, but the floorboards sagged near the corners, and the crown molding sagged like a tired jaw. "It's perfect," Anton said, dropping his keys on the mantel. The glass above the fireplace was clouded, the reflection of his face blurred at the edges. Mrs. Blackwood's hand hovered over the wall beside the door. Rule 1. Never prop anything against them. Rule 2. If you hear knocking, walk away. Rule 3. Knocking? Anton crossed his arms, skepticism a shield. From the pipes? She leaned in, the scent of lavender and mildew sharp. "The walls don't have pipes, dear." A beat. "They have gaps." Her gaze flicked to the ceiling, where a patch of plaster had collapsed to reveal a latticework of wires, frayed and blackened. Anton's throat tightened. He'd read about buildings like this, structures that aged like living things, their bones shifting with time. But gaps? "You're joking." He forced a grin, stepping toward the bedroom. The hallway seemed narrower here, the tiles on one side bulging inward as if pressed from behind. Mrs. Blackwood didn't follow. The last tenant thought he could paint over the truth. Her voice echoed oddly, as though the walls absorbed the words before they reached him. Now he's part of the pattern. Anton stopped. The bedroom door frame was slightly off-kilter. The wood split where the frame met the wall. He ran a hand over the seam. Smooth, cold, alive, with the hum of something just beneath his touch. A shiver cut through his confidence. "Why these rules?" he asked, turning back. She was already at the front door, her shadow stretching long and thin down the corridor. "Because the walls don't let go, Mr. Kovacs." Her smile finally reached her eyes. "But they do collect." The door clicked shut. Anton stood alone, the apartment's beauty now a veneer. The tiles in the kitchen gleamed, but their edges were chipped, revealing something dark beneath. He pressed a palm to the wall. It didn't move. It didn't need to. The silence felt like a held breath. Collect what? The question coiled in his chest as he stared at the seamless seam. Too perfect. Too wrong. Outside, the city roared. Inside, the walls watched. Waiting. He'd wanted independence, but here, even the air felt borrowed. The radiator hissed like a dying breath, but Anton barely noticed. His textbook lay open to Chapter 7, The Illusion of Control, though his eyes kept drifting to the cracks in the ceiling. They'd grown overnight, he was sure. Delicate as spiderwebs, they traced the outline of something almost familiar. A hand, maybe, pressed against plaster from the other side. He shook his head. Old pipes, settling building. The rationalizations came automatically, rehearsed like mantras. His apartment, His apartment, finally, wasn't special. Just another decaying relic in a city that had forgotten how to care for its ghosts. Then the sound returned. Not a creak, not a groan, a moan. It slithered through the wall behind his desk, low and wet, like something drowning in the marrow of the building. Anton froze, pen hovering over his notes. The air thickened, carrying the scent of mildew and something older, damp earth perhaps, or the metallic tang of blood. He pressed a palm to the wall. Cold. Too cold. The plaster pulsed faintly, like a trapped heartbeat. Pipes don't breathe. He snatched his hand back. His pulse hammered in his throat. Rationalize, diagnose, survive. The walls were just walls, thin, crumbling, harmless. But as he turned to grab his phone, the shadows shifted. The crack above his bed widened, just for a second, revealing a sliver of darkness that didn't belong, a void where there should have been brick. Anton's breath hitched. He told himself it was the angle of the streetlight, the fatigue, the way his mind always raced when he was alone, truly alone. For the first time in weeks, the weight of the empty rooms around him pressed in, not as freedom, but as a cage of his own making. The moan came again, closer now. A whisper almost tender. "You're not alone." His hands trembled as he dialed the building manager's number. The phone rang once, twice, then a click, followed by silence. Not dead air, listening silence. He hung up. Outside, the city buzzed on, indifferent. Inside, the walls breathed. Anton stared at the textbook, the words blurring. The illusion of control. He'd read the phrase 100 times, but now it coiled in his gut like a question. What if independence wasn't freedom at all? What if it was just the space between you and the thing waiting to swallow you whole? The radiator sighed, the crack in the ceiling widened, and Anton, for the first time since moving in, didn't reach for an explanation. He just stood there, listening to the walls hum his name. Anton's footsteps echoed too loudly in the narrow corridor, each step a reminder of the hollow space between his apartment and the next. The hallway's Art Deco moldings, once elegant, now sagged like tired eyelids. Cracks spiderwebbed across the plaster, their edges darkened with age. Not the neat fissures of settling concrete, but organic, almost breathing gaps that seemed to shift when he blinked. He adjusted his grip on the psychology textbook, its pages dog-eared with notes on cognitive dissonance. Rationality is control, he told himself. If I can explain it, it can't hurt me. Sarah Chen materialized from the gloom of her doorway, her cardigan frayed at the cuffs. "You shouldn't stay here," she said, voice low. Her knuckles whitened around the handle of a wicker basket. The building, it's not just old, it wants to be noticed. Anton forced a laugh, the sound brittle in the stagnant air. Wants? It's a structure. Cracks, creaks, basic physics. He gestured to the wall, where a new fissure had split the wallpaper's floral pattern. See? Thermal expansion. I've got a paper on this. Sarah stepped closer. Her eyes darted to the crack, then back to him. It wasn't there yesterday. Then it was there, and I didn't see it. He crossed his arms, the textbook a shield. Rationality is control. But the crack had looked different this morning, narrower, almost closed. He chalked it up to fatigue. Now, the plaster around it seemed to pulse, a faint undulation like a heartbeat beneath the surface. His pulse spiked. Optical illusion, stress. You think you're the first student to move in here? Sarah's whisper scraped against the silence. People disappear. Not physically, but their minds. She pointed to the crack. It listens. It learns. Anton's jaw tightened. Paranoid ideation. You're projecting anxiety onto inanimate objects. He diagnosed it in case studies, the human need to anthropomorphize chaos. But when he looked back at the wall, the crack had lengthened, stretching toward his apartment door. like a root seeking water. The wallpaper's roses, once vibrant, now looked wilted, their colors bleeding into the grime. "Why do you stay?" she pressed. "If it's just a building." "Because I chose it." The lie tasted familiar. Independence is strength. But the crack seemed to mock him, widening another inch, revealing a sliver of something dark and glistening beneath the plaster. His breath hitched. "Mold. Just moisture damage." Sarah's voice softened. "My aunt lived here for 40 years. One day she forgot her name. Now she just sits, stares at the walls." She touched the crack, and for a second, Anton swore the plaster twitched under her finger. "You think you're separate? The building connects us. It's not isolation that's dangerous. It's pretending you're alone." He jerked back, the textbook slipping from his grasp. It thudded against the floor, pages splayed open to a chapter on the illusion of control. The crack now ran the length of the hallway, the roses on the wallpaper wilting into blackened petals. His pulse roared in his ears. It's not real. It's not real. But the air smelled of damp earth and something older, like the breath of a thing that had waited decades to be seen. "Go home," Sarah said, stepping into the shadow of her doorway, "before it decides you belong to it." Anton snatched up his book, his hands steady only by sheer will. "I'm fine," he lied, forcing his feet toward his apartment. Rationality is control. But as he turned the key in the lock, he glanced back. The crack had sealed itself, smooth as unbroken skin, except for a single hairline fracture near the floor, shaped like a handprint. Inside, he locked the door and leaned against it, the textbook pressed to his chest. His breath came fast, rational explanations tumbling over one another. Settling, illusion, stress. But beneath the words, a colder thought slithered. What if the cracks aren't in the walls? The silence of the apartment felt different now, not empty, but waiting. He traced the edge of the textbook, his fingers trembling. For the first time, independence didn't feel like freedom. It felt like being forgotten. The cracks began as hairline fractures in the plaster, barely noticeable against the peeling Art Deco wallpaper. Anton traced one with his fingertip, the paper crumbling like ancient parchment. He'd dismissed it yesterday. Settling foundations, he told himself. A logical explanation for a building older than his grandparents'. But now, under the flickering glow of his desk lamp, the fissures moved. Not visibly, not like a creature, but in the way they rearranged themselves when he looked away. A jagged line near the ceiling had curved overnight, forming a shape too deliberate to be random. A spiral, tight and hungry, as if the wall itself was swallowing its own breath. He stepped back, pulse a dull thud in his throat. "Rationalize this," he demanded internally. "Old buildings shift. It's physics, not fantasy." But the spiral pulsed when he blinked, its edges softening, blurring, like a mirage of stone. His reflection in the warped bedroom mirror seemed to lag a second behind his movements, the glass warping his face into something gaunt, unfamiliar. Mrs. Blackwood's voice, when he called her, was all brittle cheer. "Honey, this building survived the Depression," she'd chirped, the receiver crackling with static that sounded too much like whispering. "A little character keeps the rent cheap." She hung up before he could mention the spiral. Now, alone, the walls breathed. Not the settling groan of pipes, but a slow, wet inhalation, as if the plaster were living tissue. Anton pressed his palm flat against the wall. The surface was warm. Outside, the city hummed, cars, sirens, the indifferent rhythm of people moving through their lives. He was independent, wasn't he? A psychology student, a rationalist. But the cracks were spreading faster, snaking toward the doorframe, their paths intersecting into patterns that felt like text. He squinted. Was that a letter? A symbol? The air thickened, the scent of damp concrete and something older, like wet earth in a grave, coiling in his lungs. His hands shook as he pulled out his phone to take a photo. The camera flash flared, and for a split second, the cracks surged toward the light, a network of veins constricting around the lens. The image came out blurred, the spiral replaced by a smudge of shadow. But when he lowered the phone, the wall was different. The cracks had deepened, the plaster peeling back in delicate curls to reveal what looked like bone, porous, yellowed, and undeniably human. Anton stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. The impact echoed too loudly, as if the room were holding its breath. He wanted to call Sarah, but her warnings, "The walls remember everything," now felt less like superstition and more like prophecy. Instead, he stared at the wall, where the bone-like structure pulsed faintly, the cracks knitting and unknitting like a slow, patient heartbeat. He was supposed to be in control. This apartment was proof he could survive alone. But the walls weren't just decaying, they were consuming. And as the spiral widened, its edges now framing his reflection in the mirror, Anton realized the truth. Independence wasn't strength, it was just the space between you and the thing that would claim you. The city outside kept moving. No one heard him whisper the question into the silence. What if the walls are right? The peeling wallpaper in Anton's living room curled like old skin, revealing faded Art Deco patterns beneath. He adjusted the desk lamp, its brass fixture tarnished with age, and aimed his phone at the wall. 10:27 p.m. Shadows moving independently. No external light source. His voice, steady for the recording, wavered only at the end. The shadow of his hand stretched across the wall, normal. But when he clenched his fist, the shadow's fingers splayed first, then followed his motion. He froze. A trick of the light, he told himself. The building's warped floorboards shifted underfoot. The walls, once elegant with their cracked plaster moldings, now breathed like a living thing. He stepped closer. The shadow of the lamp swayed left as he moved right. Impossible. He filmed it, but the video showed only stillness. Optical illusion, he muttered, scribbling in his notebook. Refraction? Fatigue? The rational explanations felt flimsy, like the wallpaper's brittle veneer. Then the shadows danced. A shape detached from the corner, a smudge of darkness that slithered across the ceiling. Anton's pulse hammered. He snapped a photo. The image was blank, but in the room, the shadow coiled into a spiral, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. His breath hitched. This isn't physics. This is... The spiral dissolved into smaller shapes, hands reaching. His own shadow recoiled, but his body remained still. He stumbled back, knocking over the lamp. In the sudden dimness, the shadows surged. They didn't flicker, they crawled, merging into a single undulating mass that pressed against the walls, as if the building itself were exhaling. Anton's fingers trembled over his phone. Document it. Stay objective. But the shadows weren't just moving. They were learning. They mimicked his panic, stretching into his silhouette, then beyond it, into shapes he didn't make. A whisper of movement behind him. He spun. Nothing. But the shadow on the opposite wall now wore his face, grinning with too many teeth. He dropped the phone. The screen shattered, but the recording kept running. In the glow of the broken display, the shadows paused, listened. Can you document the unrecordable? The question clawed at his throat. He'd come here to prove he could stand alone, but the walls had other plans. They weren't just decaying, they were hungry. And independence, he realized with a chill, was just another word for being abandoned. The shadows lunged, not at him, at the space around him. The air thickened, the room tilted. Anton's notebook lay open on the floor, his last entry half finished. If the walls are alive, who's really living here? Outside, the city hummed, indifferent. Inside, the shadows folded him into their pattern. Anton's fingers left sweat on the doorknob as he wrenched it open. Dawn bled through the cracked lobby window, promising escape. He'd planned this for hours. The precise angle of his shoulder against the doorframe, the speed of his stride. Freedom was a math problem he could solve. The hallway stretched, impossibly long. Last night, it had been 3 doors wide. Now, the peeling wallpaper, once a delicate floral pattern, curled like burnt skin. He ran. His sneakers slapped against warped floorboards, the sound echoing as if the walls were breathing. Left at the staircase, left at the mailboxes. The instructions blurred. He turned. The exit sign glowed above a door he'd never seen before. Relief surged, until he pulled the handle and stepped through. The hallway. Again. His pulse hammered in his throat. The same sconce flickered above the same oil-stained carpet. No, 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 no. He kicked the nearest door. It swung inward, revealing the bathroom with its cracked mirror, the shower curtain swaying without wind. He slammed it shut. Another door. Another hallway. Another same. Sweat stung his eyes. He pressed his palms against the wall, feeling the plaster's uneven ridges. The building wasn't just decaying, it was shifting. A fresh crack split the air like a zipper, and the hallway twisted, doors multiplying like teeth. He lunged for a stairwell, but the railing dissolved into mist. His foot landed on empty space. He fell backward into the lobby. The front door stood before him, the glass pane reflecting his hollow eyes. He grabbed the handle. It turned. The street should have been there. Cars, the smell of rain, life. Instead, he faced a hallway he'd already traversed. The wallpaper's flowers now looked like screaming mouths. His breath came in ragged sobs. He hammered on the door, shouting until his voice cracked. The sound didn't echo. It was consumed. Like Mrs. Blackwood's whispers in the elevator. Like the way Sarah's warnings about the building's hunger had curdled his blood. "You're not leaving," the walls seemed to hum. "You're already part of us." He slid to the floor, knees to his chest. The door's brass handle gleamed, mocking him. Independence had been a lie he'd told himself since moving in. "I don't need anyone." But the truth was worse. He wasn't trapped. He was chosen. The building had always been watching, waiting to fold him into its rotting bones. Somewhere a floorboard creaked. Not from his weight. From elsewhere. Anton closed his eyes. The panic didn't fade. It settled, heavy as the dust in the air. Outside, the world moved on. Inside, the walls breathed. And Anton, for the first time, wondered if he'd ever really existed at all. Anton's key turned with a groan, the lock yielding like a dying breath. Sarah's apartment smelled of mildew and burnt coffee, the kind of odor that clung to the back of the throat. Sunlight slanted through grimy windows, illuminating dust motes dancing over a half-packed box, textbooks, a chipped mug, a single sock. Normal. Too normal. His pulse steadied. Maybe she'd just moved out. Left in a hurry. People did that. Then he saw the wall. It bulged where it shouldn't, the plaster rippling like water. A photograph jutted from the surface, Sarah's grin frozen mid-laugh, one corner of the frame dissolving into the wall's grain. Her journal, spine cracked, was fused to the texture. Pages splayed open to a sentence that read, "I think the building is," before the words melted into the plaster. Anton stepped closer, rationality kicking in. Moisture damage, structural decay, common in old buildings. But the air thickened, pressing against his skin. A glint caught his eye, a silver ring, Sarah's, embedded near the ceiling. He reached out, fingers brushing the cool, porous surface. The wall breathed. His stomach dropped. Beneath the ring, a hand emerged from the plaster. Not a sculpture, not a trick of the light. Sarah's hand, small and pale. The nails chipped the same blue as the kitchen cabinet he'd seen in her photos. The fingers were slightly curled, as if she'd been grasping at air before the wall swallowed her whole. "No." The word cracked. He jerked back, knocking over the box. Textbooks spilled, their pages flapping like frantic wings. Rational. observe, diagnose. But the wall pulsed, a slow, wet throb. The photograph trembled, Sarah's smile warping as the plaster crept over her eyes. Anton's breath came in shallow gasps. His mind raced. Schizophrenia? Sleep deprivation? But the journal lay open, the ink smudged with something dark and viscous. Real. The wall wasn't decaying. It was consuming. He stumbled to the window, desperate for proof of a world beyond this room. The city skyline had shifted. The street below was gone, replaced by a yawning chasm of brick and shadow, the building stretching upward like a living spine. His reflection in the glass flickered, a face white as the plaster, eyes wide with the terror of a man realizing he'd never been alone. The walls had always been listening, waiting. Back at the wall, the hand had inched deeper. Only the wrist remained visible, the blue nail polish bleeding into the plaster. Anton's knees buckled. He pressed a palm to the surface, half expecting it to pull him in. Cold. Alive. She tried to escape, he thought, and it ate her. The journal's last visible word mocked him. Alive. His rational mind shattered. This wasn't decay beneath surface beauty. It was beauty as decay. A gilded cage built on the bones of those who thought they could stand alone. The walls didn't just absorb bodies. They absorbed independence. A new sound rose from the plaster, a whisper, like dry leaves skittering over stone. Join us. Anton backed toward the door, but his legs felt hollow, as if the floor might swallow him next. The question coiled in his chest, sharp and suffocating. If the building is alive, what does it mean to be free? The hand vanished completely, the wall smoothed over, leaving only a faint blue smudge where Sarah had been. He ran, but the hallways stretched, the ceiling lowering, the air tasting of dust and something older. Hunger. The walls were closing in, and they were just getting started. The plaster crumbled like stale bread beneath Anton's fingernails. He'd pried a loose chunk from the bedroom wall hours ago. Just a crack, he'd told himself. A symptom of the building's age, not evidence of something wrong. Now, the hole yawned wider, revealing not brick but a hollow cavity, its edges lined with brittle paper. Yellowed newsprint. His pulse thrummed in his temples as he tugged free a sheaf of pages. The Daily Clarion, October 17, 1938. The headline screamed, "Fifth resident vanishes in Blackwood Towers. Police baffled." A photo of the building, its Art Deco facade gleaming under a sun that no longer existed. Beneath it, a smaller article. Superintendent Blackwood denies rumors of foul play, citing errant tenants and urban transients. Anton's breath hitched. He'd scoured the city archives for weeks, chasing rational threads, lead paint, gas leaks, mass hysteria. Anything to explain the neighbors who'd not moved out, but simply ceased to exist. Now the proof fanned in his hands like a cursed deck of cards. Another paper, dated 1952. Widow Mia Renfrew, last seen entering apartment 4B. A third, 1979. Man found dead in hallway, cause unknown. The dates aligned too perfectly, each disappearance mirroring his own mounting dread. The room tilted. The walls, once merely peeling, seemed to breathe. Subtle shifts in the wallpaper's floral pattern, the way the baseboard's shadow stretched an inch longer than before. He pressed a palm to the cavity. The plaster was warm. Alive? No, his mind recoiled. Decay. Just decay. But the papers were dry, preserved, as if the building had eaten them, digested their truth into its bones. He traced the name Blackwood in the 1938 article, the super's name, the same name etched on the rusted mailbox in the lobby. A coincidence? Or a lineage of silence? Anton's hands shook. This wasn't about independence anymore. It was about the illusion of it. The way the world demanded he stand alone while the walls conspired to swallow him whole. What if autonomy is just the last thing they take from you? The final page slipped free. A single line circled in ink. The building remembers what you forget. A draft slithered through the room, though the window was shut. The papers rustled, whispering in the hollow. Anton's rational mind screamed coincidence, confirmation bias, but his gut knew better. The fear he'd buried, the terror of being trapped, unseen, now had teeth. He wasn't proving his strength here. He was being catalogued. The walls pulsed. He dropped the papers. They fluttered to the floor, arranging themselves into a neat stack as if awaiting a new resident. A new story. Anton backed away, but the hallway stretched longer than it had been. The exit blurred. His breath came in shallow gasps. Run, his instincts urged. But where? The city outside demanded his independence, his self-reliance. Here, the building demanded his silence. He was neither trapped nor free. He was collected. The last headline blurred before his eyes. Residents report shifts in apartment layouts. And in the hollow, something sighed. The plaster groaned. Anton pressed the putty knife against the newest fissure, a jagged black line snaking from the ceiling toward the center of the room. His breath hitched as the wall pulsed, a slow, wet undulation beneath his fingers. He jerked back, heart hammering against his ribs. The crack widened, not with the dry crackle of settling brick, but with a sound like tearing silk. They're watching. He'd sealed 20 cracks today, now 30. They bloomed like mold after rain, each one a dark, wet mouth. The ornate 1930s moldings, once a symbol of the building's faded grandeur, now seemed to coil inward, the intricate roses and scrolls warping into grasping fingers. Sunlight slanted through the grimy window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, but the light itself felt thick, as if the room were breathing it in. Anton smeared more spackle over a hairline fracture near the door. It seeped into the wall like ink on water. The crack shuddered. Then it split open, revealing a deeper void, a flicker of movement, like something shifting in the dark. "Stop it," he whispered, voice raw. His hands trembled. The putty knife clattered to the floor. The walls exhaled. Cracks spiderwebbed across the ceiling in seconds, their edges glistening as if lined with mucus. A low hum vibrated in his molars, rising to a chorus of whispers. Not words, but the sound of recognition. He stumbled backward, knocking over the ladder. The floor tilted. For a heartbeat, the room stretched, the far wall lurching closer, the door shrinking to a keyhole. Then it snapped back. Trapped, invisible. His deepest fear made flesh. He bolted for the hallway, but the door frame warped, the wood swelling like living tissue. He threw his shoulder against it. The frame gave, not with the splintering of wood, but with a wet, sucking pop. On the other side, the hall wasn't the hall. He stood before a wall of pulsating plaster, the same black cracks now forming a crude, leering face. Anton's vision blurred, his skin prickled, as if the air itself were pressing in, testing his edges. The walls didn't just observe, they hungered. Every attempt to mend, to control, fed them. The spackle had been a meal, his fear a feast. He slid to the floor, back pressed against the shifting wall. It conformed to his spine, warm and yielding. A crack opened at his temple, breathing his panic into the dark. Can you escape what already sees you? The question wasn't his. It slithered up from the plaster, the same way his rational mind had seeped into the cracks. The walls had always known. They'd been waiting. Not for a victim, but for a piece of the whole. His fingers dug into the crumbling wall. It oozed between them, not dust, but something that clung like spider silk. The last of his control unraveled. The building sighed in satisfaction. Anton gripped his keys tighter, forcing his mind to catalog the facts. Hallway length, 12 feet. Ceiling height, 8 feet unchanged. But the floorboards creaked underfoot, flexing like muscle. He dropped the keys, clatter, and blinked hard. The bathroom door, solid oak with brass latch, had dissolved into wallpaper, crimson roses crawling across the plaster like veins. Illusion, he thought. Draft or fatigue? He pressed his palm to the wall. It yielded, warm and pulsing. Heart slamming, he pivoted toward the living room door, always second from the left. It swung open to the kitchen instead, the sink's faucet hissing black droplets into a basin where his armchair once sat. He lunged inside, boots scraping warped linoleum, and yanked a drawer. Utensils jangled, but the room tilted. His desk skidded across the floor unbidden, blocking the exit. Moved by vibration? He shoved it aside, fingers white-knuckled, and barreled into the adjacent wall. It sighed, wallpaper peeling to reveal damp wood grain. "Analyze," he muttered, breath ragged. But the air thickened with mold and earth, undermining his logic. The front door, salvation, now gaped where the bedroom window should arch, its knob mocking him with a gleam. He dashed forward, floor buckling like breathing ribs, and twisted the handle. Beyond, his bed, sheets rumpled as if recently abandoned. Not real. Echo of memory. He slammed it shut, whirling back. The hallway had warped, a new passage unfurled, doors sprouting like tumors along its length. Adrenaline surged. He charged the first door, bathroom, tiles slick. Second, closet, empty shelves mocking his disarray. Third, his own wardrobe, but stuffed with faded fur coats reeking of camphor and regret. The walls throbbed now, a rhythmic suck and release syncing with his pulse. Measure it. He paced to the kitchen door, counting strides. 7, 8. But as he glanced away, the frame shimmered. The window vanished. The sink migrated to the room's heart, gorging on shadows, water bubbling like swallowed screams. Legs gave out. He slumped against the front door, its panels firm under his fists. Turn the lock. Exit. But the mechanism jammed, unyielding. A groan echoed. Settling beams? The city's drone outside faded, smothered. Doors. Always doors. Shifting thresholds that devoured certainty. Freedom is structure, the rational voice insisted. Yet the building rebelled, fluid and alive, folding his world inward. His nails clawed the frame. Independence? A delusion. The structure claimed him, ribs of beam and plaster encircling tighter. Click! The door creaked open, not to freedom, but his bedroom anew. Books toppled, life rearranged in mockery. Anton stepped through, trembling, the panel sealing behind. Deeper corridors beckoned, doors whispering promises of escape or entrapment. No fixed path, only the building's irrational pulse, doors daring him to try again. Anton's knuckles were white around the doorknob of Mrs. Blackwood's apartment, the wood splintering under his grip like rotten teeth. The hallway had narrowed since he'd last walked it, ceiling tiles sagging into the space like bloated veins, but he refused to look up. Rationality is the only shield left, he told himself, the mantra fraying as his breath hitched. The air smelled of wet plaster and something older, metallic. Blood? Rust? He couldn't tell anymore. The door creaked open. Mrs. Blackwood stood silhouetted against the dim glow of a single bulb, her silhouette too tall, too still. Her dress, once elegant silk, clung to her frame like dried mud. Her eyes, glassy and unblinking, reflected the flickering light. In her hand, she held a yellowed newspaper, its headline barely legible. Grand Opening of Blackwood Manor, 1932. "You've been digging," she said, her voice a wet scrape, like stone dragged over stone. Anton's pulse roared in his ears. "I need to know what's happening here. The walls, they're alive. They took Sarah. They're taking me." She stepped aside, gesturing him in. The room was a museum of decay, velvet curtains moth-eaten to lace, a chandelier choked in cobwebs. But the walls, they pulsed. Not shifting, not anymore. Breathing. The floral wallpaper peeled back in slow, rhythmic waves, revealing raw, glistening layers beneath, like skin stretched over bone. Anton's stomach lurched. This is the truth. This is it. Independence is a myth, dear boy. Mrs. Blackwood smoothed the newspaper, her fingers sinking slightly into the paper, as if it were clay. The building feeds on the illusion of control. Your fear of being trapped? It's delicious. She tapped the headline. I was the first tenant. I thought I could outsmart it. Built my life here. For it. Now, I am its voice. Anton's hope curdled into ice. You gave people to it? Her smile was a crack in porcelain. They wanted to believe they were safe, alone, strong. She stepped closer, the floorboards groaning beneath her. You're no different, clinging to your little routines, your rationality, as if it could save you. Her hand shot out, grasping his wrist. Her skin was cool, porous, like the walls. The building doesn't trap you. You trap yourself by pretending you don't belong here. Anton wrenched free, stumbling back. The newspaper fluttered to the floor. A photograph on its front page caught his eye. A young Mrs. Blackwood, radiant, standing beside the newly built Blackwood Manor. Behind her, the architects grinned, unaware their creation was already hungry. How far will people go to maintain the illusion of control? The question slithered into his mind, unbidden. He looked at her, not a woman, but a vessel. Her silhouette blurred at the edges, merging with the wallpaper. The walls exhaled, warm and damp against his neck. You could join us, she whispered. Become part of something real. No more fear, no more loneliness. The truth hit him like a physical blow. His independence had never been his. It was a cage of his own making, a lie he'd swallowed to feel strong. The walls weren't trapping him. They were waiting for him to stop fighting. Anton turned to run. The hallway stretched, impossibly long. The exit sign flickered, then died. Behind him, Mrs. Blackwood's laughter echoed. Not a sound, but a vibration in the floorboards, the walls, his own ribs. You were never alone. The newspaper lay forgotten at his feet, the headline bleeding into the rotting wood. The wallpaper peeled like sunburnt skin, revealing veins of damp plaster beneath. Anton pressed his palms against the trembling wall, the peacock blue pattern warping into grasping fingers. Not real, not real. But the whispers slithered through the cracks, Mrs. Blackwood's teacup clinking, Sarah's laugh fracturing into static. Anton! Sarah's voice bloomed from the baseboard, warm as the day she'd handed him the lease. Her face surfaced in the plaster, eyes wide, lips moving silently behind the wall's skin. Her hand punched through, a flash of gold bracelet, the one she always twisted when nervous. Anton recoiled, but the wall rippled, swallowing his wrist. Cold seeped into his bones. Independence is a lie. The thought slithered in. He'd scrubbed the mold from the sink, paid rent on time, proven he could survive alone. Now the building breathed with the weight of every tenant who'd ever called it home. Their muffled sobs, the creak of their final footsteps. A photograph slipped from his pocket, his mother's smile, frozen in a frame he'd left behind. The image warped, the glass cracking like a spiderweb. You're already gone. The walls pulsed. A woman's scream curdled into a child's lullaby. Anton's knees buckled as Sarah's fingers tightened, dragging him toward the fissure where her face had been. Her mouth stretched, silent, hungry. The peeling wallpaper curled into a mouth, teeth of lath and lime. He stopped struggling. The terror wasn't in the pull, it was in the relief. To stop fighting. To let the building cradle him, as it had Sarah, as it had Mrs. Blackwood. The photograph dissolved into the plaster, his mother's eyes bleeding into the wall's mosaic of lost faces. The last thing he saw was his own reflection in the warped mirror above the sink. Fading. Belonging. The walls sighed, content. Can you ever be alone when the world is made of the people you've left behind? The plaster tasted like dust and old blood when Anton's shoulder met the wall. One moment he'd been backing away from the peeling floral wallpaper, its faded roses now writhing like exposed veins. The next, his skin sank into the surface as if the building had exhaled. No, 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 his mind screamed. But his legs were already dissolving into the wood-framed abyss, the floorboards groaning as they swallowed his calves. The walls pulsed, warm and wet, a heartbeat syncing with his own. He clawed at the doorframe, knuckles splitting against the flaking paint, but the doorknob, brass ornate, the only thing that had ever felt real in this apartment, slipped through his grasp like smoke. His left hand vanished first, the fingers stretching toward the hallway light as the plaster sealed over his wrist. The sensation wasn't pain, but hunger. 1,000 tiny mouths pulling at his bones, weaving his consciousness into the building's rotting skeleton. He screamed, but the sound was devoured before it left his throat. The wallpaper's roses bloomed crimson, their petals detaching to swirl around him like embers. "This is what happens when you think you're alone," the walls seemed to whisper, their voice the creak of settling timber. "You forget you were never separate." Anton's free hand slammed against the wall, desperate to push back, but the surface yielded like flesh. His palm sank to the elbow, the cold seeping into his marrow. The apartment's geometry warped. The hallway stretched into a tunnel of breathing drywall, the ceiling sagging like a starved belly. He caught a glimpse of his reflection in a shard of broken mirror on the floor. His face was half submerged, eyes wide with the terror of becoming part of something ancient, something that had devoured Mrs. Blackwood's secrets, Sarah's whispered warnings, all the tenants who'd ever called this place home. The doorknob glinted in the dim light, just out of reach. He lunged, but the floor tilted, his hip disappearing into the wall with a wet pop. His breath hitched, not from lack of air, but from the horrifying clarity. Independence was the lie. The building had never wanted to trap him. It had always been waiting for him to surrender. The roses on the wallpaper curled into smiles. The last thing he felt was the walls cradling his skull, gentle as a mother's hands, as the world folded inward. The doorknob remained, cold, useless, waiting for the next tenant to turn it. Anton swung the hammer with a scream that tore from his ribs like splinters. The plaster crumbled under the blow, revealing not lath, but a pulsing membrane, veined with shadows. He struck again. Crack! And the wall sighed, peeling back like rotted skin to expose a writhing mass of faces, mouths open in silent screams. His own reflection flickered among them. Mrs. Blackwood's milky eyes, Sarah's trembling hands, 100 others, all glistening as if submerged in oil. The hammer clattered to the floor. He staggered back, but the room tilted, walls exhaling a damp breath of dust and decay. Another section collapsed behind him, then another, each fracture a window into the collective. A woman's face pressed against the membrane, her lips forming his name. Anton. Anton! He clawed at the nearest gap, fingers sinking into the gelatinous surface. The soles surged forward, not to escape, but to welcome. His palm fused with the wall, not pain, warmth, as if thousands of hands had wrapped around his wrist. The building's heartbeat thrummed in his molars. This is what independence looks like, the thought slithered in, to be swallowed whole and called free. The ceiling sagged, revealing a hollow space where the sky should be. Instead, an endless corridor of trapped residents stretched into the dark, their bodies morphing into the architecture, fingernails sprouting as mold, hair weaving into cracked paint. Sarah's voice echoed from the depths. "We tried to leave too." Anton's knee buckled. The wall embraced him, swallowing his shoulder, his hip, his breath. He was becoming part of the pattern, a fresh stain on the building's decaying beauty. The hammer lay forgotten, its purpose as hollow as the promise of autonomy. Somewhere, a floorboard groaned like a dying man's last laugh. The last thing he saw before the walls closed over his eyes was his own reflection, smiling back from the collective. "You were never alone," it seemed to say. "You were just last to join." The wallpaper peeled like sunburnt skin, revealing veins of damp plaster beneath. Anton's breath hitched, not from panic, but from the awful, rightness of it. The walls no longer held him. They knew him. Every tremor in his pulse echoed in the mildewed cornices. The creak of floorboards matched the shudder of his bones. He'd fought to keep his hands from shaking, his mind from fracturing, but now the fight itself felt like the last gasp of a lie. Independence was a cage, he realized, and the key had always been in the walls. The membrane began as a hum in his molars, then a pressure behind his eyes. It pulsed, soft, insistent, like a heartbeat beneath the building's skin. He pressed his palms to the wall, not to push, but to feel. The plaster yielded like flesh, warm and yielding. A whisper slithered through the air, not in words, but in sensation. "You've always belonged here." The thought should have horrified him. Instead, it felt like coming home. His vision blurred. The peeling paint bled into the silhouette of Mrs. Blackwood's curtains. Then Sarah's smile as she'd warned him. "Don't listen to the walls, Anton." Too late. The membrane thickened, a translucent shroud wrapping his limbs, his thoughts. He could no longer tell where the building ended and he began. The terror of vanishing was fading, replaced by a crushing sweetness, like sinking into a bath after years of shivering. Is this what they meant? The walls had never wanted to trap him. They'd been waiting. The last flicker of resistance died as the membrane sealed over his mouth. No scream, only a sigh as his memories dissolved into the building's breath. The scent of lemon polish and decay. The creak of the third-floor window. The quiet sobs of every soul who'd ever called this place home. He was Anton, and he was Mrs. Blackwood, and the boy who jumped from the roof in 47. The walls didn't steal. They remembered. In the silence, the building exhaled. A new pulse joined the rhythm. Anton's.